right, take it away, Dennis.
All right.
Planers and sanders.
Planers and sanders. Well, thanks for coming, the four of you. That's good. That's always good. So we're going to talk about planers and drum sanders today. And we'll just get 3 questions out of the way right away. Yes, Kim, I do have a planer. And yes, Kim, I do have a drum sander.
Uh-huh. Along with everything else.
And which came first, chicken or the egg?
Planer.
Planer. I've had 3 planers, and then I got the drum sander. And we'll kind of go over why you might want one versus another, or why one's better than another on certain tasks. But right off the bat, I wanted to, on either one of these, I always use one of these rollers for in-feed and out-feed. I have 2 rollers. How you doing?
Hey, guys.
Hey, you guys got 2 more.
All right.
So, so I need to restart. Yeah. Don't forget to sign in there. But I always use a roller on the outfeed side for sure, whether I'm on the drum sander or the planer. And if I'm planing, a lot of times I will do on the infeed side too, on the longer boards. Once it gets to be about 6 or 8 feet long, it just helps me get that board through the planer. But before I dive deep into the planers, I just wanted to show you a couple of things and then we'll move on. You've all heard me talk about the bag switch featherboard. You know, I love this thing. You know, you put it on your table saw and 2 turns and it's ready to go. Well, I love this thing. But MaxSwitch has what they call a quick lock system. And so we have that set up. There's a tool lock, and then over here, there's a hose lock. And then that's just a twist on. And you're ready to go. And boy, we just got those in a couple of weeks ago when I outfitted my shop with them, and boy, I can't say enough good about them. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that that's what those are. And one other thing I'll mention is you need 1 hose lock for every hose on your dust collector. If you have to, I have 2 hoses. So you need a hose lock for each hose, and then a tool lock for each tool that you want to connect to. So I have, in my shop, I have the planer, the drum sander, a jointer, and an edge sander, so, and a router. So I have locks to all of them. So anyway, and the other thing is I'll mention that too, is that on these hose locks, there's a set screw. There's 3 set screws that tighten that onto the port. And it's a real little set screw and an Allen wrench.
It's that little tiny thing right there.
It is. So if you decide to do something like this, trust me, take your Allen wrench and tighten those screws till they're just about protruding out before you even go to the machine. Just, oh my gosh. If you have to turn that Allen wrench too many times, it's such a fine little Allen wrench, it just kills you. So take it from me. If you do something like this, get that set screw out where it's just about to engage before you actually try to do the tool. It just makes things a little bit easier.
And there's 3 of them on each one, right?
And there are 3 of them. So anyway, we get sidetracked, but I just wanted to let you know that. So we'll talk about the planer to begin with. And I'm going to actually just get this out of the way now, but these are a nice thing. Like I said, I use mine all the time on the outfeed side. And a lot of times, if it's a longer board, I'll do it on the infeed side. I told you I've had 3 planers. I've had a Makita, rigid, and now this one. And the reason I like this one so well is that this virtually eliminates snipe. I mean, and especially when you use those rollers, infeed and outfeed rollers, it helps a bunch. But there's very little snipe to this machine, so that's a big plus. let me just spin this around for just a moment. There's two settings, a rough cut and a finish cut. So when the machine's running, that's when you'd want to adjust that. And if you adjust it to the fine cut, what happens is it just slows the dry belt down so that it pushes that wood through slower, so you get more cuts per inch. And then if you're on the rough cut, it's feeding through just a bit quicker, actually a lot quicker. So there's an adjustment wheel there, so you can adjust to whatever thickness you have, and then whatever thickness you're going down to. There's a wheel here that has I think it's quarter, half, 3/4, and an inch. So if you set it at one of those, obviously if you set it at 1/2 inch where it is right now, it would plane all the way down to a 1/2 inch, and then it won't go, you can't lower the blades any deeper. So
Is it pretty accurate?
it's very accurate. Yep.
That's handy.
Yeah. As far as blades go, it's pretty easy to adjust. There's 4 screws here. There's a wrench included. So there's 4 screws. This would lift off, and then you'd see all the internals. There's a dust shroud inside that covers that drum. And once you release that and get that out of there, that pulls up and out, and it releases, there's a lock lever down in there, and when you lift that up, it locks that blade, or the drum, it won't turn. So then you can go ahead, and there's 3 sets of blades, 10 screws on each one. So you just loosen all those 10 screws, remove them. There's a metal plate, a metal bar that secures that blade down. So there's a magnet here, so you just lift out. And then you can take that magnet, and then you can go to your blade, pick it up, rotate it, drop it back down, and then reinsert your support bar, and then tighten those 10 screws up again, and you've changed the blade. They're reversible, so you have two sides to every blade, which is a nice thing. Takes about 10 to 15 minutes to do that. Don't get in a big hurry. You want to make sure that you get everything tightened. And I say that because I had one time I did not get a screw tightened. So all of a sudden I heard something, and luckily it spit it out, but it never caught the blades. So, but I heard it. Anyway, so I had to undo everything, and sure enough, there was a screw gone. So we had to order a new set of screws. But anyway, just take your time when you're doing it, but it only takes about 10 minutes. If you're wondering what that little string is when I hook that hose up to this port, it hangs down, and it can hang down in front of this outfeed table and just get in my way. So I always take my string here, and I wrap it around that hose, and then I can keep that hose up and out of the way. It's a kind of a low-tech thing for me, but Kim doesn't seem to need it, but I always do.
No, I use it all the time.
So anyway,
How about your little tip on the date on the blades?
Oh, yeah, I do have it here. I always label the machine when I change blades, so I know.
Hi, Dwayne.
Hi.
When I changed them, so I have some idea how long they've been on there, and I can kind of think back to how many times I've used it. Because they do dull. There's that. Another thing, I guess, as long as we're talking about planers right now, is I have these 4 pieces. These are bottoms to boxes that I'm making. And they were, well, the cherry was 13/16, but the others were 7/8 of an inch. And I wasn't willing to commit that entire, all 4 boards to 3/4 of an inch. So I rough cut these to about an inch longer than what they are now. And they were wider because these are all finished width and length. But anyway, they're short pieces, and it can be just a little bit unnerving to get anything less than, say, 12 inches going through that planer. So, but like I said, I just didn't want to commit that whole board, canary wood in particular. I didn't want to commit that to 3/4 of an inch yet because I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of it. So what I did was I did have a piece of canary or I actually had 3 offcuts that I hadn't used. So I thought, well, this will be okay. I don't mind having this at 3/4 of an inch. So what I did was I had these pieces, and I'll start running those through the planer. And then once that's going through, let me just raise this a little bit. So once that's going through there and feeding through, I'll get these going, and then I feed them all back to back so that it's like one continuous board. And then I don't worry too much about it. I've never had any trouble doing that. And that's where that outfeed roller thing comes in handy, because that gives that somewhere for that wood to land. So
It's a good tip, Dennis.
yeah, yep, it worked for sure. But I always keep some scrap stuff around too. So I mean, I just happened to decide I could thickness this and I'd be happy. But it could have just as easily been some scrap oak or poplar or whatever that I have. But I'll use that as a lead-in to when I'm doing some of my boards, especially. I mean, I can't tell you that it will never snipe, but it never snipes bad. I mean, do you all know what snipe is? Okay. And you know what bad snipe is. So sometimes this will just, the tail end or the lead end will just every little bit just get a little something. And it's always, with this planer, it's always been easy enough to sand away. But if I'm really getting particular, I'll always feed something through first before my workpiece, just to eliminate that possibility completely. So anyway, that's kind of the mechanics of the sander, the planer. Can't think of anything I necessarily missed. Is there any question you're thinking? Go ahead.
Do you change the blades on a schedule, or do you notice what they're going?
No, you notice it. A lot of times you just see it in the cut. It just isn't. You can tell when it's just not quite right. Yeah, sometimes, and if you nick a blade, then you can really see it. And actually, if you can see that there, those are the holes. So, and there's little slots in there. So what happens is if you nick that blade, one of the blades or all 3 of the blades, you can go back in there, loosen those screws and adjust those. What you're doing is it being there like this, you're shifting it a little bit one way or the other. And so all 3 blades don't line up perfectly, though, you know what I mean? And then a lot of times that eliminates that mark.
Yeah. The other things that I've noticed as far as when to change blades is the planer will get noticeably louder. So that means it's working a lot harder. And sometimes if you're in feed and out feed, it's not pushing or pulling it through.
Oh.
That's a sign that it's really time to maybe look at the blades.
Let me just show you this too. So this is at 3/4. So if I'm pushing this through, I never take off very much either. So I don't take off much. That's all I can tell you. I don't take off much. But if you notice, now I've set that, and it's telling me that that's a 64th of an inch. You can see that raising up there, right there. So I do use that as a bit of a gauge, because I don't ever want it to go above that first line. It's just too much for it, in my opinion. Even if I'm rough, even if it's on rough cut, I'd rather go through 5 or 6 times than 3 times, and just.
They get pocket out of what would it be to get to that?
Yeah, and it just works that planer so hard when you're taking off that much. So, I just take off little bits, and I do it 6 times instead of 3, 10 times instead of 5.
Especially on things like hard maple and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Don't plane well anyway.
Yeah. But it's a really nice planer. I'm really happy with mine, that's for sure. And the nice thing about it, as far as like I had the Makita, which that was 30 years ago. It was a great planer. And the rigid was okay. I liked it, but again, there's just literally no snipe with this, so it was worth the money to me. Where was I going with this though? There was a point to all that. Boy, it escaped me. It was a good point too. Trust me, it was a good
You'll
point.
remember it later.
I will, and then I'll jump back to it. I remember.
Or simply midnight, we don't care.
Then we'll have to send out an email to you.
Dennis
Yeah.
remembered.
It'll come back to me.
I was like,
Yeah. But anyway, it's a great planer. Oh, I know it. I got it. The thing about this one versus the Makita was that on the Makita, the bed adjusted, not the blades, and that was nice enough, but yet at the same time, that means that if I'm using an outfeed roller, an infeed roller, I got to adjust that all the time because it's the bed's going up and down, not the planer head. So that was a huge thing for me.
Does this planer have a lock on it? In other words, do you have to lock it down or anything when you adjust the height at all? I don't think it does.
No.
Because I have...
But it has the ability to lock itself when you're changing blades.
Right, yeah. Well, I have a rigid planer, and it's the same. It's just like what you said. It's a great planer. It's got the interchangeable blades and everything. I get more snipe than I do with this. But the thing I ran into with it is there's no lockdown. So sometimes when I'm planing really hard woods, it'll start to rotate itself up.
Oh! You know, and
it's a
I've
weird
never...
thing.
Uh-huh.
So I made a wooden wedge that goes in the handle right here just to lock it down. But I know some planers do have like a lock after you set the depth.
Gosh, I never thought about that, but I've never experienced that either. It's pretty firm. I mean,
Yeah, I haven't either with this one.
yes.
We
So-
use the heck out of this one.
We do a lot
plan all
of
kinds of stuff.
You know, we're
with it.
planing stuff all the time, so, which is another reason why I need to know when I changed it. So, yeah.
Do you guys have a Kenya straight line versus an exact helical and square? And it's
If helicals thick as a brick, if you can do it. But to be honest with you, I converted, because I have this planer at home, and I did convert it from the straight blades to a helical head. And you know, it was like a $400 or $500 option, but I decided to do it. Got it done. It was a little hard to do. I mean, I had to watch some YouTube videos and whatnot, but I got it. And boy, I cut, and it's just as nice as this is the way it is. It's even better with a helical head. But what I found is, just so you know, is that it taxes, that helical head taxes that motor more than these straight blades do. So when I'm planing, I have to, if I'm doing an 8-inch board, I can generally run an 8-inch board at about 8 feet, and then I'm going to have to let that, it's either going to stop or I'm going to have to shut it down and let it cool for 30 seconds or so. One thing I didn't mention though is that it does have a reset button. So if it gets hot, and it does with that helical head, I'll be running through there, it'll trip the breaker and it'll shut the machine down. And then I have to wait, I don't know, anywhere from 30 seconds to, depending on what I'm doing, sometimes I'll just walk away from it for 2 or 3 minutes, and then I come back and you just push that button and reset the breaker. And then what I found is that you can actually just turn the machine back on, and it'll take off, and you never see where it, you don't know where it, you don't see where it stopped, you don't see where it starts. I find that amazing. So I learned that by accident. I got frustrated one day, you know, because I kept thinking, well, I'm going to have to raise the head, pull it out, and then reset it and go back through. And one day I'm like, I just stand back and I did this. and it took off, and I couldn't tell where it stopped and started. But anyway, to answer your question one more time, that helical head taxes the motor more. So if I were to do it again, I probably wouldn't do it. And I read some reviews before I did it. And the reviews, the guy said, well, I haven't had any trouble at all, but I've heard other guys saying that it does tax the motor a little bit, and that eventually it's going to throw a breaker. Well, it does it more than used. So it takes me longer to plane boards now than it used to. The cut's darn nice, but...
And you don't have to change blades as often.
No, because you can just rotate those blades quarter turn at a time, and so you got 4 different cuts with them. So
how many blades are on that? Do you know?
No, I don't. It's like, I want to say 55, but that's not divisible by 3, so I don't know exactly what it is. But
we do sell a jet portable planer out there that comes with the helical head, so it's kind of a new planer.
Yeah, you might look into that. The helical head is really nice, and I actually put one on my jointer. I have an old Delta jointer, 6-inch jointer that everybody in the world has. I don't remember the model number now, but and I put a helical head on that, and oh my gosh, I got to the point where I didn't like changing the blades or sharpening those cutters, and I quit using the planer, or the jointer, I mean. And so I put that on there, and oh man, that's one of the better moves I've done too. So helical heads are nice. I just wouldn't necessarily, I'd want you to know that what my experience was before you did it to yours. So, and if I were going to say I had a piece of this, maybe it's 5 inches, even if it isn't, if I needed to remove a 1/4 inch off of this, I'm using the planer versus the drum sander. But if I were just needed this to be a fraction less, I might just go ahead and just shove it through the drum sander, because if I only need to take a whisker off, it's just about as easy for me to do it on my drum sander as it is to do this. So, I mean, there's a use for each one of these for sure. We were just cutting some, I was doing some resawing Thursday, I think it was. And I took some, I think it was 5/4, wasn't it? Isn't that what it was?
Yep.
5/4. And I was in a hurry, so I just eyeballed it and run it through. And when I resaw, I just goes vertical. And this one I actually raised to halfway up. A lot of times I'll work my way up, but I actually just raised it about halfway up, run it through, spin it around, and run it through again. And this is what you get. So my point there is if I needed to remove, if I just want to get rid of the burn marks, I'd probably just go ahead and run it through the drum sander. But if I needed that to be at like 1/4 of an inch or so, I'd probably run it through my planer and have that set to 1/4 inch and be done with it. It's kind of a hit or miss on what I decide to use, but like I said, I have both. If you don't have both and you don't have either, in my opinion, personal opinion, would be to get a planer first and drum sander second. Personally, with what I do. Where the drum sander really comes in handy, in my mind, is it's like this stuff. Now, this has already been run through, but it didn't always look like this. So when I make these type of epoxy boards, I'll run it through the drum sander, and this would work because it's less than 13 inches. That's the other thing. It's a 13-inch planer. So anything beyond 13 inches, you don't have the option of using the planer. You more likely have to use the drum sander. But I had found that the first time I tried running an epoxy board through my planer, I was going to plane it down. It immediately, the moment it went through that first time, it nicked, that was before I had the helical head, it nicked all 3 blades in the same location. So I just had this little line running down my, oh my gosh. And so I had to take it apart, and I shifted those blades left and right, but I could never get that heat nick to really go away. It apparently nicked it too far in order to make that adjustment. So that got me to using a drum sander all the time with this kind of work. Now, Kim and I were just talking to a guy last night that actually uses his planer all the time on epoxy type stuff, but he's got a helical head also.
Mm-hmm.
So the next time, maybe I will try one again. And show
Did he
it to
say
you.
what kind of planer he had?
He didn't, but I'm guessing it wasn't this.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's a bigger, more
Sure.
heavy one. So, that's kind of, you have any more questions on the planer? I mean, we always come back to it.
Oh,
but-
there is one other thing that this model has that's really cool that my Rigid doesn't. It's got a fan that blows through here,
Oh, yeah.
and a lot of planers don't have that, so that helps just push all those tips through. So that makes a big difference.
It does, because, man, it generates a lot of chips, dust, I mean.
Yep.
You want to do hearing protection, too, for sure. I mean, these are really noisy. Even the helical head is not as noisy, but it's still loud. So I always have hearing protection on for sure when I'm doing that. But, and again, if you're going to do any amount of planing or whatever, find some way of doing in-feed and out-feed for sure. But those rollers make a big difference.
Okay.
The drum sander, which was that was my latest addition, but boy, once you have one, you wonder why you didn't have it sooner. So, again, like I told you, I use it when I use it, and then I have both, so I'll use whichever one I think I need to do what I need to do. but almost all of my epoxy stuff is gone through the drum sander. It's just, to me, it's easier in that you can fine tune it, you know, you can just, I don't take off very much at a time. It's like the planer, only it's even less than, because this thing will actually adjust a quarter of a turn on this is actually, it says a 64th of an inch. And when I'm sanding, I never turn it a quarter of a turn, because it's too, to me, it's too much. I'd go ahead about an eighth of a turn. So I'd go from there to there. And again, you're going to do it 10 or 15 times versus 5 or 7 times, but I think the results are better. So let's get into this for just a little bit deeper. Let's get this out for a minute. Get this out of your way. So, on off, there's, I don't think I have it plugged in yet. So this is the, this drives the wheel, the belt. So the higher you turn it up, the faster the belt moves. I usually keep it, I keep it around 60 all the time. Because what this has also is what it calls IntelliSand. So I'll turn it up to 60 or 70 sometimes if I'm in a real hurry. But it doesn't matter if you're in a hurry or not, because that IntelliSand, what happens is when you push that wood through, it senses how much it's taken off. And that red light, there's a red light there, that lights up and it slows that belt down. So it, even though it seems like, even though it was going like this to begin with, that once that IntelliSand shows up, then all of a sudden it's going like this. So, and it does it on its own. It knows how fast it can proceed. So let's just open the hood up here. It looks like somebody used this and didn't clean it. It's all.
I bet it was Dwayne.
I'll bet it wasn't Dennis. That's what we're gonna bet. Okay? So
I don't know what you're inferring.
if you have one of these, you need a crepe stick. And when you get one, get 2. Because you're gonna be happy you have that second one when the first one's near done and you're in the middle of something. So,
Do you want to know what went through this?
oh, please tell me.
So my son redid he created a home theater room in his basement, and he wanted to do this floating shelf that the TV floated above, and he was going to set his stereo components, homemade stuff. So the way he wanted to do it was he took 3/4 inch Baltic birch, ripped all the strips into 3/4 inch wide strips, and then edge glued all of them together into panels about 12 inches wide. And then once those panels were all done, he glued all of them together. So he had this real edge grain Baltic birch vibe going. And then of course he had to miter the front too, you know, because it had to go on down towards the front. But so anyway, we made up 12-inch panels, and then of course when you glue things up, things aren't always even, you know, but we came in here, covert operation,
Yeah.
Friday night.
Yeah.
And I had never used this machine before, so I was kind of like, okay, I think I could figure this out. But anyway, we ran all those pieces through, and man, I tell you, it just flattened them all out, just as smooth as can be. And he was amazed. I mean, he was just like, holy cow, you know. So that was a great way to use it.
And the point of that is that there's a good use for the drum sander versus a planer for sure.
Yeah, because with all the glue joints, that probably would have nicked those blades up.
Yeah, you
good.
just don't know. So
that's what happened.
yeah. And again, anytime you need something over 13 inches, this is no longer valid anyway. So let's point this out again. You got your on off, This is drives the conveyor belt. This thing here is a digital readout. We'll get into all this, but it's a digital readout. It's a great thing to have. I don't usually use it myself, but it does work. I'm not even going to try to clean this
Then
because
Is it that bad?
yeah, it's bad enough that we don't need to do that. Or we could try it. I mean, let's try it. Let's be fun for a moment. Can we be fun? I mean, so one thing you do want to remember is if you're going to change a belt and stuff, make sure you unplug it. So when I go to change the belt here in a minute, make sure I unplug it. Do as I say, not as I do. So I'm actually gonna turn the dust collection on, even though it doesn't look like it's gonna work, but it will a little bit. What I'm gonna do is gonna turn this on, get that belt spinning, then I'm gonna run that crab stick back and forth and clean that belt, or try to. So let's give it a try here. It actually cleaned up not too bad. I mean,
good.
and actually, we would all just continue to use that belt. I know this.
It's actually nice and it was actually quiet.
Yeah, they're not loud for sure. Yeah, yeah.
And this much spot.
Do you want to see me change a belt?
He doesn't really want to show you how to change a belt. And I know this because we had this conversation yesterday. And
It's okay.
he's always complained about it.
No,
You don't have to choose it.
Put on speed.
Maybe just explain how you do it.
there's two clips here. There's one on this end, which is the outfeed side, the outboard side they call it. You can see that little clip right there. If I press that, that's going to release that tab. And then this is going to come out. And then it's going to unwind over to, there's another clip just like it on this side. It's just so much harder to do that with on the inboard side, especially for my hands and my fingers. They just don't work like they used to, so it's a lot tougher for me to change a blade. But what you want to do is put that in, clip it in there, then you just start wrapping that around, and it's okay to have a little bit of gap. And then the thing that you want to keep in mind is that when you get around to this end, you want there to be, that's okay for that gap to be there. You need that tab to not be this way any further than that. It needs to be, because they've got an explanation for it, but I have found that when I have done mine and I've nudged it over too far, it'll if there's too much, if I'm working that part of the belt too hard, that's where it's going to tear. It's going to tear here. It's not going to tear out here. It's going to tear on the inboard side here. So that's kind of an important part of this, is to make sure you got some gap there.
So like these gaps here, that's not a big deal either.
No, not necessarily, because I mean, it's spinning.
Sure.
So yeah, I always try to get them as close as I can, but sometimes but it's important that this thing gets attached here like that. So if it ends up being just a little bit of space there, that's fine.
What's the roughest grit you can get for this?
I think there's 60. I don't know if there's one.
60?
I use 80 on mine almost all the time. I have some 150, but I don't, because it's so hard for me to change blades, just because, or belts, because of that whole hand thing, that I use the 80 almost all the time. I don't use it as a finish sander, so. And believe me, if you're using 150 grit on it, you're taking very little off, and if you need to take more off, you're going to be there a while. So 150 doesn't take it off very fast. So like I've told you before on these epoxy things that I do, I use the 80, and it takes it off a little quicker. The drawback to that is that now I have sanding lines in my project, and it really shows up on epoxy, but it shows up on just wood also. But that all has to get sanded away, so then I have more sanding to do than if I would have maybe finished up with 150. It's just, I don't do it. Maybe you should. So maybe don't do as I say. Yeah, it might be better if you had 150. Oh. Let's
So would you build from 80 to both you?
I wouldn't try sanding something at 80 and then switch to 150 and then run it through, and I probably wouldn't do that. But if I had something that was already in pretty good shape, but I wanted to sand it a little bit, I might go to 150. From my standpoint, what I do is just, it isn't necessary to sand, and because I'm going to sand it with Miranda Morbid anyway. So.
Buy two of them.
Probably
So,
there's 2 of them in this shop.
let me just-
He's just not telling us.
Let me just show you a little bit on how to set this up. It's got a quick release here. I just turned that like that. Now this is going to raise up and down. So I can adjust specific. I mean, if I needed to do this, I would have had to done that for sure. Because, I was already down like this. Now if I want to sand this one, you can either crank it or you can release it and do that. So that's kind of a handy feature. I use that quite a bit because not everything's, 13/16 or even 7/8. So we have that. If I set this, now I do this, now it's back to the crank. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise that back up. I'm going to pull that out. So I don't use this gauge, but I'll turn that on for you. It's telling me that that's at an inch and inch .93. But anyway, what I would do is, let's just go through it again. I'm going to raise that up. I'm going to do that. I'm going to unlock that. I'm going to raise that a couple of turns, pull that out, and then I'm going to drop that back down probably. I did like 2 turns there. I'm going to drop that down about a turn and a half. And then I'm going to run that through the first time. And I'm guessing that I probably raised that or lowered it too much. But we're going to find out, won't you?
Would you use L to adjust it? Can you sit it down and talk to your piece? Would you then, if you're using gauge, would you zero it out at that?
Well, what I would do is, what you can do is do that. You could zero that out, lower that down, zero it out, and now you start talking about negative numbers on how much you want to remove. So that this, and I've never done that, but that's what the manual says. So it would then tell me how much I'm removing, not how thick the piece is. Right now it's telling me that it's set at 1.82 inches. So there's different ways of using that gauge. And I don't want to tell you it isn't a great thing. It's just, I find that I don't use it just because of the way I work, I guess. And I'm always measuring. I got measures, you know, rulers in my apron and everything, and calipers. And so I'm always checking with calipers when I'm doing stuff. So, it's okay. Let's just push this through and see if I did how I screwed it up. 1, 2.
Tonight.
So what should happen, I'm going to turn this to about 60. Now the belt's dry. What should happen is that the telesand's going to kick in and see that red knob light up. It's going to raise the spot. Pass.
To be honest, that's what happened when Carson and I used this, is we were taking, that was a 12-inch wide piece, and apparently we had it set too low to start with, and the belt went from moving at full speed down to about half speed. So I thought instantly, oh boy, what have we done here? Not knowing that it had IntelliSand. But then later talking to Dennis, it's like, okay, well that I understand why it did it now. So that's a pretty neat feature, because I think that helps prevent burn marks and stuff too.
Yeah, and I'm sure it helps the motor too. So now what I just did on this one, and let's just try this, is that I just dropped that down so it touched, but then I just went ahead and brought it on through with just the conveyor belt, so we're not going through so much setup there, and we'll find out if this works. So now we, 2 passes and we completely removed that burn mark.
Man, that is nice.
Wow.
It, you know, and this is, it's just over 7/16. That's just it's just over 7/16. So what I'd probably want to do with something like this, I'd probably, since it's 7/16 or a little bit more, I'd just push that through. Say I wanted at 3/8, I would just push this through a couple, 3 more times and get it down to that, as opposed to going to a planer. And because for one thing, there is no 3/8 on the planer, so
You just have to get measured as a.
you do. There is a gauge, and you can say 3/8 of an inch, and it's pretty accurate. But in this case, I would go to my drum sander and I would just keep sanding this till I got close to 3/8. If it's just a little over, that's still okay, because I'm still gonna probably need to sand this, because it's 80 grit. So it's probably gonna need to be sanded a little bit. So,
It's your best ever.
So
It's pretty amazing.
let me just do the other one real quick, because I'll probably use the wood somewhere. So,
you really think that you kind of need both.
Like I said earlier, I had the planer, and then I got the drum sander. And for me, that worked well.
So you could take your finger.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. So we got a little snipe on that. I'm not exactly sure why that happened. It happens once in a while. I'm gonna clean that belt real quick. Couple of points to be made there is that when you're cleaning that belt, make sure you got a good hand on that crepe stick.
Yeah.
Is those, when it gets down to about that long, it starts to get really hard to hold. And, I can own up to it. I mean, I was cleaning this thing, and it's only this crepe stick's only that long. I'm cleaning that thing, and all of a sudden that tears out of my hand. And that thing just wham! And it ran down in here, and it just jammed that. And it stopped that in a heartbeat. And man, I just had to quick to hit the hammer to shut it down.
Actually stopped the motor, huh?
It stopped it. Yeah, it stopped that.
At least it didn't turn around and wing it back at you.
Well, there is that, but I'm telling you, that was like a 10-minute thing to try to figure out how to get this.
Out of there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how do you do it? Any way you can.
With great discipline.
Yeah, I mean, I was hammering on it, had a screwdriver in it, I raised it up, tried to get underneath it, and oh my gosh. So, just be advised. But my other point is you saw that it had a little snipe on it. That'll happen once in a while. It just does. I can't tell you why and how to eliminate it. I don't know why it did that necessarily. But I never sand a finished length. I always have, even when I'm planing. I always have a couple extra inches on front and back just for that kind of thing to happen. And even though I was telling you how I fed those pieces through, well, that's why, is because if there's going to be snipe, it's going to be on that lead edge of that first board that push through there. So always protect yourself, you know, just leave yourself a little more and then cut it to finished length when you're ready. So the other thing I wanted to make sure you understood is it's a 1632 drum sander. I don't use it as I don't do much that's wider than 16 inches, but I have. And if I were going to do, say, 18 inches or 20 inches or whatever, a width, well, obviously you can't do it in one pass. So what you need to do is, there's a little lever here. I'm going to twist that. So now what's happened is that little lever took that bed and it kicked it like this. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but that's what it did. 3/1000th of an inch. So I feed that through, and then when after you get that through, you rotate the board 180 degrees and feed it through again, and theoretically, and I think it works most of the time, but theoretically, whatever that 3/1000th of an inch little, that's going to show up on the first board, obviously. So it'll disappear on the second pass. So that's how you get a 1632 to become 32 inches.
When you do that and you rotate the board away, and does it have to be like fed in the same spot? Like
not necessarily. I mean, some of that depends on if it's a 19-inch board. You know, you're probably feeding it through like this, and I don't think it has to be exact, but more than likely you're going to kind of push it through in about the same place, just based on the width of the board you're trying to. Mm-hmm. But that's one of the nice things about these. I have the 1632. In my instance, I now probably wish I'd have gotten the 1938. I was concerned about the footprint on my shop. So, and I kept thinking, oh man, I don't know if I can fit this. I don't know if I can fit this. So I went with this one, and it fits just fine. But if this 1938 doesn't take up that much more in either direction. So, and a lot of my stuff is actually is less than 16 inches anyway. So I guess I did make the right move. But anyway, I'm babbling on about that.
So talk about the belt real quick, the feed belt.
The conveyor belt.
Oh, yeah, we were getting this ready yesterday, and this belt right here, this edge, was a bit frayed. And what can tend to happen is that this is called a conveyor belt, and over time, what happens is they loosen or they stretch a little is what happens actually. And it had tracked over to this is the inboard side, and it started to fray that belt. So we ended up, there's some adjustment screws here. It's this one in particular. If it needs to track back the other way, it's less pressure here and more pressure here. Isn't that what that was?
So.
Yeah. So you just adjust that screw in accordance with which way you want that belt to track over, and then you just keep driving the conveyor belt until it doesn't do it instantaneously. It can take a couple 3 minutes to get it edged over there, because if it goes too fast, then you've adjusted it too much, and it's just going to keep going. So.
And technically, you're supposed to loosen these screws a little bit, right?
No, not those screws are bent for when you're adjusting that conveyor belt to begin with, so that it's nice and tight.
Okay.
So once you have that tight, then those are good. And then if it stretches over time, then that's the point of these screws right here, is you can adjust those, and that'll stretch that out just ever so slightly to tighten that conveyor belt up. But if it starts to track, which mine at home has, I mean, I've had to adjust that a couple of times now. Over time, it doesn't happen every time, or it just happens. And so every once in a while, I have to just take a few minutes and just got to do some adjusting and get it tracking back the other way. And then I'm back in business. So they are replaceable. I have not replaced mine yet. I don't know. I think mine's must be 6 years old or so, and I've not replaced it at all. It's still in pretty good shape, but they are replaceable. Again, if you don't have one and you get one, you're going to wonder why you didn't get it sooner. They are a nice tool. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to...
Well, that's a great explanation of it. I'm sold.
Do you have, I mean, I can talk about stuff as much as you want me to, or I can shut up too.
So you mentioned that it leaves sanding marks. Can you get away with doing less finish sanding if it's coming off the planer instead?
It's going to be a smoother finish coming out of here than it will here. But some of that is because this is an 80 grit paper.
I want that.
But again, if you've got a 150 grit paper on here and you're trying to do some serious sanding, it's going to take you a whole lot longer to do it than it will if you had 80 grit on. And again, like I tell you, I mean, I do a lot of those charcuterie boards, and you've seen the coasters and stuff that I do. I just need to get level with the board. That's my big goal. And once I get that, then I just go to the random orbit sander and sand through the grits. Because it really shows up in epoxy. Just, you know, those grit lines yeah. And it'll take a little while to remove that. Even with, I'll usually, if I'm using this at 80 grit, on that epoxy stuff, I will take and start with maybe a 60 grit on the random orbit, and I'll sand that surface a couple of times with the 60 grit. Then I'll go to the 80 grit, and then I sand on that with an 80 grit until those sanding lines disappear. So if they're not disappeared, they're all but gone. And that's when then I go to 100 grit, and then 120, 150, 180, 220. I don't skip grits when I'm doing the epoxy work.
Why do you drop back down to 60 if you run it through at 80?
Mostly because I'm in you know, it's that patience thing. Yeah, because you probably wouldn't see it quite so much on like even a cherry board where I wouldn't show it, the sanding marks like epoxy shows it. So when I'm doing that, I just get started a little more aggressive and I get them about halfway gone on the 60. Then I know that when I go to 80s, it's not going to take me quite so long. So, and you've all seen me you've seen it, that, and Kim's the one that had this, but I'll always, when I'm doing a board, and I just back and forth on both sides, and then I just sand that until that pencil mark's gone, and then I'll usually do that a couple of times with the 60 grit. And then once that's done, then that 80 grit, it'll only take maybe about 3 more times, and then the sanding marks are gone. And then once you get past those sanding marks, then all of a sudden life's a little bit better. You know, then it just takes a couple of times with each grit after that, you know. So, and sanding is about the least fun thing. The only thing less fun than sanding would be finishing. You know, and they're both important, you know. what are you gonna do, huh?
One other way I used this particular sander was, remember we had that Australian cookie, that burl
Oh, yeah,
that came in,
yeah.
and it was just as uneven as can be. I mean, I tried starting with 80 grit with the 5-inch random orbit sander, and there's no way I was going to get that thing all flat. And so I started running it through this machine, and of course it was, gosh, what was it? 30 inches maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
24 maybe. So I was doing the same thing that you were talking about with the lever, and then running it through, spinning it around, running it through again. But what I found was that you really need some support out here, because that particular piece was about 3 inches thick. And so, I mean, it wanted to
Yep.
hang over like that and kind of drop. So that would be a great place for that, the rollers to set up over here, and that way you've got support as well.
Which is one of the reasons that I don't do much of that, because it is a lot of work, and I'm a one-man operation in the shop, and I can't call my wife out to even help me for just a few minutes to get something done. So I avoid some of those situations just because of that kind of thing.
But
But believe me, what he's saying is and there's rollers that when you get a 6 or 8 foot piece out that's like 8 or 10, 12 inches wide, it's pretty heavy.
yeah.
So there's a lot of torque on that thing when it's just starting to enter the machine. You want to make sure that it's not,
Yeah.
so.
Well, it was a couple hours using the sander.
Was it?
It was, yeah. And it just it barely would nick, a one edge off, and then the next pass it'd nick that, take that, and then a little here. Then the third pass, it's pulling 3 spots. But I just kind of, just like you said, just gentle adjustments there, not much.
Oh, yeah.
And
I generally just turn this, like I think I told you, it's a 64th of an inch at a quarter turn, and I almost always do an 1/8 of a turn. That's my standard practice, and then I have to pass it through just that many more times. But
yeah.
to me, life is infinitely better when I do that.
But it ended up coming out really flat, and threw a coat of Rubio on it and put it out there, and then it sold a couple weeks later. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
just interesting to run it through this, and I can't really imagine trying to do it with the hand sander, with the
Oh, I
random
know.
orbit sander. It's just too long, and
I think Dwayne was asking me the other day about how I might flatten a board. And if it's like something like this, if this weren't flat, it's got just a little bit of a twist or something to it, and it's let's say it's 3/4 of an inch thick. But what I would do is I would put that on a piece of MDF, because I'm pretty confident that MDF is flat. I'd lay that on there, and then I'm going to find out where that's rocking, and then I'm going to start to figure out how to shim that with a couple of wood shims, and then I'm actually going to I'll have this is how to explain this. On the MDF, there'd be a backer board that's going to butt up against this, so that board can't slide off the MDF. And then I'm going to raise that drum head till it just barely nicks something. And then I'm just going to work my way down until that's flat. And once that surface is flat, then I can actually take it off the MDF, and I'm going to flip it over, and then I can work on the other side the same way, and then you should have 2 flat sides. It's time consuming. I mean, it can be, but that's the way in my way of getting a board flat that isn't flat.
yeah.
And if they're not too bad, that's okay. If it's pretty gross, you're out of luck.
The other way I've done it before is I have a Bosch hand power planer. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
3 1/4 inch cutter or
Yep,
something
yep.
on it. It's got a depth adjustment on the front. So I'll locate those high spots and then I'll just take that hand planer and go over those high spots.
That's a
with the
good way to
hand
do it
planer
too.
And get it like to the point where it'll at least lay flat on the planer.
Yeah,
I don't have one of these, but lay flat on the planer, and then I can start working on the other side.
yep,
then.
yep, that's a good idea.
And you
too.
can do that with a hand plane too.
Right.
Just takes a little bit longer.
If you guys got anything to share, don't be afraid to share it. Either send it to us or show us phone pictures on the phone when you're here. We always want to see what other people are doing. Gets me inspired. And sometimes I feel like a slug because I think, oh my gosh, how do they do that? So please, thank you for coming.
Since you're down.
Happy
Good to see
Easter.
everybody.